The kids were finally in bed and asleep, and the living room was way too quiet. I know I should probably read a book or tackle that pile of laundry, but I found myself opening that dumb social media app instead. I hadn't even used it in months, but after one too many glasses of wine, mindless scrolling starts to feel like a genius idea. His face popped up and my finger moved before I could even think twice. He was Mark's buddy from college, the funny one who used to have me in stitches. I remember he always had some goofy anecdote to make those boring dinner parties bearable. Haha. I commented on some ridiculous meme he posted about cats. Stupid, but harmless, right? He messaged back within minutes. Long time no see. The banter was just like old times. We messaged back and forth for hours, him catching up on my life, me telling him about work and the kids. It felt like the old days, and with Mark snoring on the couch next to me, the rush of his attention was surprisingly addictive. He must have felt it too, because the next day the messages started early. I don't even want to admit how fast I checked my phone at work, because who knows if he'd messaged back. I started sneaking glances at his profile, checking out his pictures. He had a new job, some fancy big city title, and the beginnings of a very adult-looking belly, which was oddly endearing. But those eyes, that goofy grin, he hadn't changed that much. Meanwhile, I'm over here changing diapers and reheating chicken nuggets. Pathetic. A ping on my phone startled me, like what you see. The message was from him, a smirk practically oozing through the screen. My heart pounded. I was definitely in over my head. Better watch yourself. I tried to play it cool. But the second I hit send, I regretted it. Too bold? Would he think I was into it? Turns out, the answer was yes. Our messages went from catching up to flirty and funny, a game of pushing boundaries and trying to see who would back down first. The thing is, neither of us did. His messages were lifeline, a break from the ordinary mess of my everyday routine. And the fact that it was so wrong, so secret, that's what made it thrilling. We even moved the conversation to that green messaging app. It felt so official, like this was something real, a little world that was just for us. We started staying up late, typing on my couch while Mark breathed heavily beside me. I'd never admitted to my best friend, but I kind of liked Mark snoring, meant I could keep doing what I was doing without raising any alarms. It was messed up, I know. It's like he was reading my mind. The next day, out of nowhere, he asks, "So, when can I see this gorgeous face in person?" My stomach flipped. I knew this was a whole different level. Pictures were fun, but in person? That was real. The rational part of me, which was getting smaller by the second, reminded me that this was Mark's friend. The guy I'd made small talk with over dried chicken at a dozen potlucks. Mark probably even babysat him back when they were in college. And that image, well, let's just say it wasn't helping me stay in my lane. But then he'd send a flirty message, and the guilt would fade. It's like this switch inside me flicked off. Suddenly, it was all about the thrill, about feeling like something exciting could still happen in my life. I typed back, maybe I could sneak away for a coffee sometime. He sent a winky face emoji, and that was that. I was done for. A few days later, I sent a picture to my best friend, a black dress with heels I hadn't worn in ages. Girls' night, was all I said. Hot mama. She messaged back with a hard eyes emoji. If only she knew. He suggested a bar downtown, a place I'd never been but sounded just fancy enough to feel daring. Mark was out of town, on a golf trip or something, so the coast was clear. Well, as clear as it could be when I hadn't told a soul about this. Seeing him in person was a shock. Sure, the pictures were accurate, but there was a spark in his eyes that didn't come through on the screen. We talked like we'd seen each other yesterday, not 10 years ago. The drinks flowed, and my anxieties seemed to melt away. That is, until our hands accidentally brushed as we reached for the popcorn. We both jerked like we'd been electrocuted. I could feel my cheeks burning, and I'm sure I stammered some stupid excuse. But his eyes, he looked at me with this hunger, this unspoken intensity that made my breath catch. The rest of the night was a blur. Did we touch again? I can't remember. All I know is I got home way past midnight, a sick mixture of desire and terror swirling in my gut. I thought meeting him once would be enough. Get it out of my system and go back to being the responsible wife and mom. Except, that's not what happened. It was like tasting something delicious. Now I wanted more, and who cared about the consequences? Business meetings became my convenient excuse. Mark, bless his easily fooled mind, never questioned it. But the real trick was hiding it from my actual husband. We went from coffee to lunches, then sneaking off to hotel bars just long enough to make my body hung with that electric feeling. Every notification, every stolen moment, was a surge of adrenaline and a fresh hit of crippling guilt. I became some sort of master liar, remembering what I'd told who, so my stories never contradicted. It was a strange sort of accomplishment, one that filled me with disgust even as I reveled in it. One night, Mark's hand lingered too long on my thigh under the table. I pretended not to notice, but my mind was ablaze. I knew if I didn't stop this now, who knows where it would go, but some twisted part of me didn't want to put on the brakes. This was so much more than the tired routine of my marriage, the predictability, the feeling that the best years were already behind me. Mark was asleep beside me on the couch as I scrolled through my phone. Suddenly, a message from him popped up, just a dumb joke, nothing incriminating. But the sound must have woken Mark. He mumbled something, and my blood ran cold. Quickly, I locked my phone and pretended to be asleep, heart slamming against my ribs. That was too close. I almost got caught red-handed, all because I couldn't control myself. The paranoia was eating at me. My best friend started asking questions. "You seem off lately," she'd say. I'd snap back about her always being in my business. The guilt festered, transforming into resentment. She was the one with the problem, not me. I was just having a little fun, right? Except deep down, I knew I wasn't just some innocent flirt anymore. This was spiraling out of control, and I was the one steering the car straight towards a cliff. But even knowing that, I couldn't seem to stop. The day it finally happened, I was in a daze. It wasn't a surprise. We'd flirted with the line for ages. We both knew it was only a matter of time. Still, when he said it, "I'm falling for you," my world spun on its axis. I stammered something about it being wrong, but even as the words left my mouth, I didn't mean them. The truth is, I was flattered, and I craved the intensity, the thrill, how alive it made me feel. It was insane, but that risk was like a drug, one I couldn't get enough of. We ended up in some cheap hotel that afternoon, the kind I'd only ever seen on trashy TV. Afterward, there was the guilt, the sickening feeling that I had finally crossed a line I couldn't come back from. But there was another feeling too, excitement. Things escalated quickly. Longer lunches turned into whole afternoons spent tangled up in his apartment. I'd make excuses to my husband, to my kids, anything to get away. Lies piled on top of lies, a twisted Jenga tower ready to crash at any moment. Yet, I couldn't stop. It was like all the doubts and monotony of my life were washed away in those stolen moments. Mark made me feel seen, desired in a way I hadn't felt in forever. But the constant fear of being found out was suffocating. I'd wake up in a cold sweat at night, certain I'd left a message on display or said something in my sleep. I jumped at the sound of the doorbell, imagined my husband bursting in and catching us red-handed. It was starting to seep into every corner of my life. The kids, who I usually adored, became irritations, their noise and demands grating on my nerves. I'd snap at them over nothing, then feel a horrible wave of shame wash over me minutes later. I tried to hide it, but Mark would sometimes comment on it, asking if something was wrong. I brushed him off with another lie. Then came the work event, drinks with colleagues at a swanky place to celebrate some big project win. When they introduced me to the big shot guest speaker, Mark's new mentor, the one my husband talked about endlessly, I thought I was going to throw up. It felt like the entire building was swaying, and the only thing I could hear was the blood pounding in my ears. Mark seemed confused, my husband oblivious. The whole night, I barely spoke, just smiled and nodded, desperate to melt into the floor. It was the ultimate betrayal, not just cheating on my husband but lying directly to his face. On the drive home, my husband shattered away happily while I felt like I was underwater, struggling to breathe. This was wrong, all of it. But I also knew, with a sinking feeling in my stomach, that it was far from over. The next few weeks were a fog of misery. Every time Mark looked at me, the image of him standing next to my husband flashed through my mind. The shame was suffocating, a thick sludge in my stomach that refused to go away. Yet, when my phone buzzed with a message from him, a jolt of excitement would cut through the guilt. It was disgusting, pathetic. I tried to break it off. This can't continue, I texted, hands trembling. But a half an hour later, I was in his arms again, words evaporating from my mind like they were never spoken. I realized that as awful as I felt, it didn't compare to the panic I'd experience if this ended. I was completely addicted, trapped in a cycle I was too weak to break. Work was a nightmare. I avoided small talk at all costs, terrified that my guilty secret would spill out with my morning coffee. One day, I overheard a couple of gossipy interns talking. One snickered, heard he's messing around with some hottie from accounting. My blood ran cold. He was seeing someone else. Of course he was. What did I expect? It was like a mirror shattering, reflecting back how stupid I was. The cliché, not the exception. I wanted to cry, to scream, to confront him. But all I could do was rush to the bathroom, splash cold water on my face, and try to pretend like I wasn't crumbling into a million pieces. My sister kept saying I was acting weird. Something's up, I can tell, she probed. I wanted to scream it all at her, to beg her for help, but the shame held me back. I started snapping at her, pushing her away, driving a wedge between us. I was so alone, so afraid. And there was no one to blame but myself. Mark started to change too. He was less attentive, texts coming less frequently. It should have been a relief, but my pathetic, obsessed mind screamed at me that he was with her, the younger, better version of me. I started stalking his social media, searching for clues, finding fake confidence in the snide comments I left under her selfies. I'd text him frantically, "Where are you?" or "Thinking of you." It was pathetic, and I knew it. I hated myself, hated him. But most of all, I hated that I couldn't stop. I'd sunk too far. I was the bad guy, the loser in this story that I'd written. The only question was how much worse it was going to get. I knew it was only a matter of time until it all imploded. Still, the moment it happened, it felt like a bomb had detonated. I'd gotten sloppy. One night, after sneaking back home way too late, I forgot to log out of our shared desktop. Mark's stupid, overly cheesy messages were laid out, plain as day, like mocking neon signs. I heard him before I saw him. A strangled cry, half sob, half enraged animal noise. Rushing into the study, I found him frozen, staring at the screen. I don't remember what I said. A jumbled mess of, "I'm sorry," and "It wasn't what you think." None of it mattered. The look on his face was worse than I ever could have imagined. In those first brutal minutes, he lashed out. Not physically, but with his words. Every accusation was a jagged shard of glass ripping into me. There were tears, broken apologies. I didn't even try to defend myself. What could I even say? Then came the ice. I'd expected rage, a fiery explosion that would leave us both in ashes. Instead, he shut down. "I thought you were better than this," was all he said. A cold whisper that echoed in the room longer than any shout. He left, slamming the door behind him, leaving me alone with the wreckage of what I'd done. I don't know how long I sat there. Part of me expected him to burst back in, to scream, to break something. But there was only the hollow echo of his voice, a constant loop in my brain. He was back the next morning, his face a mask of strained calm. It was terrifying. "We need to talk," was all he said, and my gut twisted. The following hours were a blur of practical discussions and cold legalities. We talked about lawyers, temporary custody arrangements, all of it in clipped, emotionless tones. My attempts to explain, to beg for forgiveness, felt ridiculous, out of place in this sudden business transaction our marriage had become. I slept on the worn-out sofa that night, my world reduced to its harsh springs poking my back. There was no dramatic fight, no tearful breakdown. He'd already checked out, leaving me with the hollow, echoing knowledge that I destroyed everything. In the most predictable, unoriginal way possible. The next few days were a waking nightmare. My parents' reaction was exactly like I'd imagined. A whirlwind of shock, anger, and bone-deep disappointment. My dad bellowed. My mom sobbed, and I just wanted the floor to open up and swallow me whole. My brother wouldn't even speak to me, just shot me a venomous look that said more than 1,000 words. I was a pariah. News spread through the town faster than wildfire. Trips to the grocery store were an exercise in humiliation. I could feel the stares, the judgment. Every time someone cleared their throat near me, I tensed, waiting for the inevitable. I heard. People I'd known forever, Mark's friends and their wives, vanished overnight. Every time the phone rang, it was a wave of panic. Was it just a wrong number or another person severing ties? I became a prisoner in my own home, unable to face the world outside my front door. And then the Minter bombshell dropped. Mark, in a pathetic attempt at damage control, told my husband the truth. I'd hoped that part of my betrayal could stay hidden, but of course, nothing ever stays buried forever. Mark was the younger guy my husband had been raving about, the one he'd been so excited to mentor. He brought me to dinners with him, made me laugh at his jokes. The layers of betrayal felt endless, and this one, for some reason, was the straw that nearly broke me. The fight was the stuff of small-town legend. Yelling, furniture crashing, and a trip to the ER for Mark to stitch up his busted lip. My husband told me through his lawyer. It was clinical, devoid of any trace of the man I'd known for half my life. The humiliation was unbearable. Our friends divided into factions, and my family retreated, embarrassed to be associated with me in any way. My husband, the betrayed saint. Mark, the sleazy villain. And me? I was the villain, but in the most pathetic, unimaginative way possible. Everyone already knew the script. There was no nuance because women like me were a dime a dozen. I didn't even get to be an interesting monster. I want a divorce. There was no yelling this time, just the empty flatness of his voice. It didn't make it any easier to hear. I tried to plead with him, to explain, but he held up a hand and said, "Don't. Just get your things and leave." My kids, who'd always run to me for a hug, now barely looked up from their screens. Avoiding my gaze felt like their own form of punishment. I packed my things in a daze, the shame burning my skin like acid. I was the bad guy, the one who shattered their world. How could I ever make it up to them? Moving in with my sister was a punch to the gut. Her pity was a bitter pill. She meant well, but her hovering brought home the fact that I was now the helpless screw-up she had to take in. The divorce proceedings started out amicable enough, but that didn't last. My lawyer, a no-nonsense bulldog of a woman, sat me down and told me to brace myself. Apparently, I needed to prepare for a fight. He was going for full custody. He had the house, the stable career, and the sympathy of the whole town. I was the cheating wife, remember? The lawyer said I'd be lucky to get visitation on weekends. That's when I broke down. Sobs racked my body as the full reality of what I'd lost sank in. And then, the rumors started. He'd apparently already moved on to someone better, a picture-perfect PDA mom who fit the narrative way more than I ever had. They painted me as the villain, the middle-aged woman desperate for attention, him as the victim. Therapy was an exercise in futility. I spent hours dissecting every stupid choice, unraveling myself, looking for the moment where I took a wrong turn. There wasn't a single moment, just 1,000 tiny cracks in who I was, in my marriage, that finally gave way. Work was another disaster. The boss found out, a mix of disapproval and sleazy fascination lingering in his eyes. The promotion I'd worked so hard for might as well have been a mirage. Everyone knew, everyone whispered, and I became toxic to be associated with. I was the office cautionary tale, the woman you wouldn't want to leave alone with your husband. It became more than I could take. I handed in my notice and walked away. About a year ago, I, 29 male, met a woman, 31 female, at a conference in Baltimore. I was only there for work, and I wasn't expecting our night together to evolve into anything else. But we hit it off, and after cooking up for the first time during the conference, we exchanged numbers, and we kept in touch. We lived about an hour away from each other, so it wasn't far enough to completely rule out a long-distance relationship. We didn't get to see each other often, but we would text and chat when we were both available. About once or twice a month, she would visit me in the city, and we would go out together. I loved seeing her. We had a wonderful connection, and I really felt like our relationship could go somewhere. However, in hindsight, I realized that I was putting more into the relationship than she was. I didn't think anything about our relationship until I was talking to a friend about us. I explained to her how my girlfriend would visit me, but I almost never visited her. Just to clarify, it wasn't for lack of trying. I had been vocal about wanting to travel to her apartment and meet her friends. My friend was a little weirded out by that. She said that it was odd that my girlfriend didn't want me to visit her. But at the same time, my friend is the type of person who listens to a lot of true crime and watches too much television. We both kind of laughed it off like she was assuming there was something more going on. But our conversation did get me thinking. I thought I knew my girlfriend from the conversations we had, but it was all surface level. I knew what television shows and books she liked, but I didn't know anything about her family. The next time I talked to her on the phone, I asked her more about herself. I wasn't asking in a way to accuse her of anything, but I genuinely wanted to learn more about her because I saw a future with her. She just told me that there wasn't much to talk about. She gave me a short story about being an only child and her parents having passed away. It made sense that if she didn't have any family around, she wouldn't bring it up, so I moved on. Months passed in our relationship, and she still didn't want me to come visit her. It was difficult for me because I really wanted to meet her friends. By that point, she had met a few of mine and they really liked her. I wanted to see the city she lived in because I was considering suggesting that we move in together. No matter how many times I asked, she always shut down the idea of me visiting. I didn't think much about it at the time, but all of our conversations were very sexual. Whenever we would be together, we would go to dinner or bar, then we would go right back to my apartment and sleep together. I kind of just thought that it was because we were apart for so long. But after a while, the lack of depth with our conversations was getting to me. I was talking to another friend about her, just venting some of my frustrations, and he mentioned that I might be a side piece. I was very shocked to hear that and honestly kind of hurt. At the time, I felt like I had something special with her, and hearing that it might have been less than I thought was awful. He pointed out all of the facts and told me that if she's very secretive about her life, it probably means that there's something she doesn't want me to know. That thing might have been that she had a partner, possibly family. I couldn't believe that. There was no chance in hell that was the case. I actually got kind of mad at my friend for even suggesting that, so I went home and I stewed on it for a while. When my anger subsided, I started to see some merit to the point he was making. I went online to read other stories about people who were unknowingly sleeping with committed people, and a lot of my circumstances aligned. I had asked my girlfriend early on in the relationship for her social media so we could add each other, but she just told me she didn't have any. She then proceeded to tell me all about how vile she thought it was, so I believed her. However, after looking online for her, I found her profiles. She had lied about having social media, so she wouldn't have to add me to them. When I clicked on the Facebook link from Google, I realized that I was blocked. She was definitely trying to hide something from me. I made a fake account and I searched for her again just so I could see for myself what she was hiding. Just from the public view of her profile, I could see that she was married and seemed to be happy from the looks of it. There was a young child in a few of the photos. I didn't know if it was hers or what. I found her husband's name through her profile and I started looking at his. From what I could gather, they have been together since high school. I had my suspicions something was going on and I finally had an answer. Honestly, I kind of regretted looking into it. Before that, I had a great relationship with someone that I didn't feel guilty about. After looking at it, I couldn't help but feel like I was a bad person. I knew that I didn't know about her family, but I was still sleeping with her. Right away, I knew that I was going to end everything with her, but it didn't feel right to let her get away with cheating. I needed to think of some way to tell her husband and also teach her a lesson about what she did. Through looking at his social media, I could tell that he was a realtor. I reached out to him, and I set up a meeting to have a conversation with him. I said I was interested in buying a house, but of course, that was a lie. I made sure our meeting was going to be during a time when my girlfriend wasn't in the house because I didn't want her to find out about it. When the time for the meeting came, we spent a few minutes chatting with each other while I tried to decide if I actually had the nerve to tell him everything. I didn't know if that would be the end for them. I hoped that it would be because she had betrayed their marriage by being with me. After a few minutes, I confessed that I wasn't there to buy a house. I told him about how I met his wife and about the affair that ensued after, making sure he knew that I knew nothing about him and his family. He was as shocked as I was about the news. He told me something else that shocked me too. Apparently, she had been working weekends every week. She told him that it was only temporary while she was onboarding and training some new managers for work. After I told him about our relationship, he insinuated she was visiting me every weekend, but that wasn't the case. I honestly had to wonder if there was another person she was having an affair with. I only saw her once or twice a month. I sent him a bunch of screenshots and videos from our chats. I felt horrible when he was reading them in front of me. He told me that he was going to figure out what to do with them, and he thanked me for being honest with him. I spent the rest of the day feeling sick to my stomach after the conversation. I genuinely believed that she had another person that she was sleeping with. 2 days later, she called me and was immediately irate. Apparently, I had no business digging around in her life after she had made it clear she didn't want me to. I ruined her marriage, and I was the worst thing that ever happened to her. I was shocked that she was blaming me for what happened. It was her choice to lie to her husband and have an affair. If I would have known that she was married, I would have never pursued her. Honestly, the fact that she wasn't even wearing her ring during the conference said enough. After I got off the phone with her, I haven't heard from her since. Her husband, on the other hand, did end up divorcing her, and he told me that she's living with her mom until she finds a new place. I couldn't help but laugh hearing that because it made me think about how she told me her parents were dead. I'm honestly just really glad I'm past this part of my life. I'm hoping I can meet someone who is truly single and be happy. OP, it's such a shame to hear that somebody would throw away their marriage like that. We don't hear a lot of this perspective either. Your friends were right to be suspicious about your girlfriend's intentions and motives. It took you a while to listen to them, but it's a good thing that you came around. Sometimes it's difficult to see the signs when they're in your face because you can be so blinded by love, but from what it seems like, these were all telltale signs of a person living a double life. It's really awful how she lied about her family being dead too. That's not something you want to put out into the universe, and to make such a bold lie to keep your affair going is just wrong. I really hope that she does some reflecting on herself and realizes her behavior is unacceptable and can work on herself moving forward. I wish you the best in your future endeavors, and I hope you can find someone who is more honest with you. Now let's move on to our next story. My wife and I met when we were both working in the same office building 7 years ago. She was working a few floors below me, and we would often ride on the elevator together when we got to work. I always thought that she was cute, but I was a little nervous to say anything. As it happened, one Saturday I had to run into the office to grab some things. When I was leaving, I got on the elevator and she was there. Without anybody else around, we struck up some conversation and I jumped on the opportunity to ask her out. Things got serious with us pretty quickly when she got pregnant about a year into our relationship. It wasn't the end of the world for us. It was unexpected, sure, but there was some excitement there as well. Don't get me wrong. Now that our son is here, we both love him more than anything in the world. But if we could have had him at a different time, we would have. We had some struggles in the first couple of years of our marriage because I think we both felt like we were forced into it. Even through all of that, I never doubted that she was the one. We both loved each other, and we were dedicated to working through our problems. As we got older, things slowed down for us. She was able to quit her job to focus on raising our son, and I was doing very well at work. One of my coworkers tragically passed away unexpectedly, and while my entire office was mourning the loss, we had to pick up the work left behind. After their death, I had taken on a large sum of their workload. Because of that, I was spending long nights in the office, going in on weekends, and even on some holidays. I cared a lot about my work, and I wanted to make sure everything was getting taken care of. Plus, I thought there might be an opportunity for growth if I continued putting the work in. My sex life with my wife virtually died when that happened. It's not at all like I wanted it to be, but I was so exhausted after every day that the thought never even crossed my mind. I wanted to go home and eat dinner then sleep. It wasn't for lack of trying on my wife's part either. She would tell me that she wanted us to spend more time together, and I would promise her that we would after everything was finished with work. I know that none of this is exactly my fault, but if I were to take any of the blame for what happened, it would be my work. Projects that were supposed to take weeks took months, and I was overworking myself to the point of being physically ill sometimes. I hit my breaking point with work when I realized that I had worked for 22 days without a single day off. I spoke to my boss and I told him about everything I've been doing. He assured me that my work hadn't gone unnoticed. He gave me a handsome bonus, and I cashed out a week of vacation to take some time to relax. I was excited to be able to decompress at home with my family. However, when I was home and doing nothing, I had all the time and the things that were off with my wife. As much as she wanted us to be intimate just weeks before, she didn't seem to be interested when I was free. Of course, I didn't want to pressure her or push her, so just let it slide. She had been spending a lot of time at the gym working out. I hadn't even noticed the changes in her until I was on my vacation. She had toned up a lot of her body, she got her hair done, and she had a lot of mirror clothes. I asked her why she had changed so much, and she got mad at me for only just noticing. But then she told me that she just wanted to feel more confident. I tried to assure her that I thought she was beautiful either way, but I told her that she looked great. During the week, I honestly got a little bored without having anything to do. Tax season was coming up, so I started going through my banking information to prepare. As I was going through, I found some strange charges that I wasn't familiar with. Almost everything I saw was accountable and recognizable in my bank statement except for these few charges. I didn't know what they were, so I Googled the charge name to see what came up, and I thought maybe that would jog my memory. What I discovered was that it was a charge for a website called Ashley Madison. When I first heard the name, it sounded familiar. I knew I had heard it somewhere before, and initially, I thought it was some kind of hair care thing my wife must have gotten. However, when I looked up what it really was, I found out that it was a website for married people to find others interested in affairs. My heart shattered when I read that. I knew that I wasn't the one who subscribed to it. My wife had paid to use an app that would set her up with another person betraying their marriage. I needed to see for myself if she was actively having one. I made an account on the website, making a fake profile to snoop around. Unsurprisingly, there were a lot of other accounts that were clearly fake and phishing for information on the users. After some looking, I found my wife. She had pictures of herself showing her face completely. Anybody that knew her would instantly recognize it was her if they saw it. She was barely being discreet about wanting an affair. On top of that, in some of the pictures, she was wearing very little clothes. She was clearly showing off her body to potential affair partners. She stated in her profile that she was looking for fun because she felt like I was ignoring her. I was furious and heartbroken all at the same time. It was very confusing to understand where she was coming from by saying she felt like she was being ignored. I knew that I had been working a lot, but it was out of my control a lot of the time. I took the opportunity to message her and flirt with her to see if she would react. I told her that it was such a shame that her husband was ignoring her because she was flawless and he didn't know what he was missing. Not long after I sent the message, she replied. She was fully responding to every advance. She was being extremely sexual too. She was asking me for pictures, offering to send some in return. I knew then that this wasn't her first conversation on the website. If she hadn't been talking to other men like this, just how far had it gone? When she got home, I pretended like I knew nothing. She had just got back from the gym, so she was hopping in the shower. I took that opportunity to look for the app on her phone and see what she'd been saying. When I found it, I saw dozens of messages between her and other men. The most shocking part of it all was seeing men that she and I both knew talking to her. They were our son's friends' parents, people in the neighborhood, and some people I even worked with. I had no idea that many people would be using a website like this, but we live in a pretty messed up world. One of the guys in our neighborhood that she had been messaging had told her he was fantasizing about her for a long time before he saw her on the app. She said that she felt the same way. From all the messages that I read, it seemed like this was the only person she had made plans to meet up with. It was clear from the context of their messages that they had slept together and were planning on doing it again. On top of that, I found messages with another man that led me to believe that my wife was considering meeting up with him. Right away, I knew that I needed to catch her in the act. She and I married so hastily that there wasn't a prenuptial agreement or anything of the sort. I needed to catch her and get evidence, and then I could proceed with a divorce. So, I used my catfish profile to the best of my ability. The good thing about being married to my wife for as long as I was is that I knew exactly what to say to her to get her to fall for me. Within a few days of me using the app, she was willing to meet up with me. I gave her an address to a hotel and told her to meet me there. I was honestly kind of shocked when she agreed. It was extremely risky to meet up with a strange man on the internet, and she was willing to throw everything away for it. She had no idea who I was. Meanwhile, I had reached out to the wife of the man she slept with, and I told her everything. She was hysterical when I showed her what I found. I calmed her down and I convinced her that we needed to think logically and we needed to catch them. I helped her make a fake profile too, and we were able to convince her husband to meet at the same hotel. Our plan was in motion, and all we had to do was confront them both. The time came, and we left room keys for both of them at the front desk and told them to grab them and head up. My wife arrived first, and she messaged me to tell me that she was waiting in the room and attached a picture of her in her lingerie. The guy she had been sleeping with arrived next and was clearly shocked to see my wife there. After a minute of them being in the room alone together, both his wife and I went and joined them. When we opened the door, both of them were silent as they watched us. My wife grabbed the blanket from the bed and tried to cover herself because she was half naked. They tried to act like we were in the wrong for catfishing them, but they didn't have a leg to stand on. I told my wife that I was done with her and that she had really broken my heart with her actions. I could tell that she felt guilty about it, and she tried to once again put the blame on me for ignoring her when I was working. I told her that didn't excuse what she did. Both I and my neighbor's wife filed for divorce not long after that. We had mountains of evidence of their affairs against them. Apparently, he had been with many women since downloading the app. I was able to come out on top during the divorce. My wife didn't work, so spousal support was the biggest argument that we had, but my lawyer was able to get me out of payments. I got custody of our son, but she has visitations of him. The reasoning for that was that she was so easily convinced to meet up with a stranger online. They were able to convince someone that she could potentially bring a harmful person home. I feel like I'm picking up and starting anew with my life now. It's daunting, but I'm honestly glad that I found out about her true colors before we were 15 years into our marriage. Opie, I'm so sorry you had to go through something like that. It seems like you were really being worked to the bone after your coworker's death, and your wife should have been there to make sure you're okay. Instead, she was looking for an affair. Having an affair is bad enough, but knowingly having an affair with another married person is awful. One person's selfish actions have to end two marriages. It is a little concerning that she met up with a complete stranger at a hotel. Thankfully, it turned out to be you and not some lunatic, but it's a dangerous world and you can't be too careful. It's good that it was recognized during the custody hearings. It was a good thing that you did tell the wife of the man she was having an affair with. She deserved to know that her husband was using a website like Ashley Madison. Honestly, I think the existence of websites like that is disgusting, and anybody who is using it, regardless of if they have met up with anybody, is a terrible person. I wish you the best moving forward with your son, and I hope you're able to move on from this. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact. Here we were, Alex and I, clinking glasses in that cozy little Italian spot where we first decided we were serious about us. 5 years. Huh? It felt like we'd blinked and switched from carefree college kids to this, whatever this was. I laughed at his joke, one I'd heard a million times before, but tonight, it felt like a band-aid over a crack. Guilt gnawed at me for feeling distant lately, blaming it on work stress. But deep down, I knew it was more complicated than that. The weekend rolled around, and we threw one of our famous backyard BBQs. Alex was in his element, grilling up a storm. Our friends, a mosaic of our life together, filled our garden with chatter and laughter. Every once in a while, he'd catch my eye, and we'd share a smile. It was moments like these that made me wonder why I felt like something was missing. Then came the surprise breakfast in bed. Alex, in his adorable attempt to play chef, had my favorite coffee waiting. It was a gesture that transported me back to simpler times, stirring up a mix of love and unease. Why did I feel like I was drifting away from this man who knew me so well? Movie night was our attempt to just be us again, curled up on the couch with a stack of our favorite films. It was perfect, comfortable, yet somewhere between the laughter and the popcorn, I felt trapped in a routine that was suffocating me. Planning our dream vacation was supposed to be a distraction, a way to inject some excitement back into our lives. And it worked, temporarily. Mapping out our adventure, I allowed myself to get lost in the thrill of it all, pretending the restlessness was just a phase. But then Mark happened. Meeting him at the conference was like a jolt to my system. Here was someone new, someone who made me feel alive in ways I'd forgotten. We clicked instantly, over work initially, but the connection was undeniable. Staying late at work became a habit, an excuse to spend more time with him. I told myself it was all professional, but who was I kidding? The attraction was palpable. Each late night blurred into the next, and before I knew it, I was justifying my actions, telling myself it was just a fling. But as I lay awake at night, next to Alex, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to cross a line I couldn't come back from. The night was a blur of success and celebration. Mark and I had just wrapped up a major phase of our project, and the relief was palpable. To us, he toasted, his eyes locking onto mine in a way that sent a jolt through me. One drink led to another, the air between us charged with an energy I hadn't felt in years. And then it happened. Our first kiss, unexpected yet inevitable. The guilt hit me like a truck as I pulled away, but the truth was, I didn't want to push him away. Not really. Our affair took on a life of its own after that. Secret texts, clandestine meetups, the thrill of deception, it was intoxicating. I told myself it was just a phase, a way to feel alive again amidst the monotony of my marriage to Alex. But with every stolen moment with Mark, the deeper I sank into the lie. The guilt gnawed at me, a constant reminder of the betrayal. I loved Alex, or at least, I thought I did. But Mark ignited something in me that had been dormant for too long. I convinced myself I could manage both worlds, keep my affair with Mark separate from my life with Alex. I believed, foolishly, that my marriage could be salvaged. But Alex wasn't blind. He started noticing my late nights, my distracted demeanor. "Is everything okay at work?" he'd ask, concern etching his features. I brushed off his questions with lies about project deadlines and work stress, hating myself a little more with each excuse. Then came the confrontation that shook me to the core. One of my closest friends cornered me, her expression a mix of worry and accusation. "What's going on with you, Laura? You're not yourself." Denying it was useless. She knew me too well. Yet, I defended my actions, clinging to the idea that I deserved this slice of happiness, no matter the cost. The weight of my double life became unbearable. In a moment of panic, I asked Alex for a break. I need some space to figure things out," I stammered, avoiding his gaze. The hurt in his eyes was a blow I wasn't prepared for. Alex agreed, more out of shock than understanding. He packed his bags and moved to a friend's place, leaving me alone in the home we built together. The silence of his absence was deafening. I had wanted space, but now, faced with the reality of my actions, I wondered if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. The emptiness of the house echoed back at me as I threw myself deeper into the whirlwind with Mark. Without Alex's shadow looming over us, our affair intensified, the stolen moments no longer hidden behind late work nights and fabricated work trips. Yet, as the secrecy waned, so did the thrill, leaving a complicated mess in its wake. I told myself that my marriage to Alex was a closed chapter, but in the quiet of the night, doubt whispered through my thoughts. Loneliness crept in, an unexpected guest in the narrative I told myself. The absence of Alex's steady presence, once a source of frustration, now felt like a gaping hole in my life. Mark's touch, once electrifying, began to feel hollow, a stark reminder of what I'd sacrificed for this fleeting passion. Meanwhile, Alex found his stride away from the turmoil of our broken marriage. He took up running, a hobby that had never interested him before, and found a community that welcomed him with open arms. His transformation was both impressive and heart-wrenching. From the ashes of our failed relationship, he was building something new, something purely his own. Our paths crossed unexpectedly at a local park, a place where reality seemed to pause. Seeing Alex laughing, genuinely happy without me, was a jolt to my system. The stark contrast between his contentment and my turmoil laid bare the magnitude of my mistake. Mark, ever impatient, demanded clarity. "What are we doing, Laura?" His question, simple yet loaded, forced me to confront the reality I'd been avoiding. Torn between the remnants of my past life with Alex and this new, uncharted territory with Mark, I felt paralyzed, caught in the crossfire of my own making. The illusion shattered completely when Alex confronted me. A mutual friend, tired of the secrets, had filled him in on my affair. The devastation in his eyes was something I'd never forget. Yet, when we met, his demeanor was composed, almost detached. He laid out the evidence of my betrayal with a calmness that was more cutting than any outburst could have been. I never wanted it to be this way, I stammered, the feeble excuse dying on my lips. Alex's response was a quiet acknowledgement, a finality that left no room for the apologies that tumbled from me. The confrontation, devoid of the dramatic showdown I'd feared, was instead a cold realization of the irrevocable damage I'd caused. In seeking to fill a void, I'd lost everything that once grounded me, leaving behind a chasm too vast to bridge. The moment I saw Alex's face, I knew. It was like walking into a storm, the air charged with tension and unsaid things. I stumbled over my words, a clumsy plea tumbling out. Alex, I'm so sorry. I was confused, lost. Can we? Can we start over? It sounded feeble even to my ears, a desperate clutch at straws that were no longer within reach. Alex looked at me, and I saw the change. The pain that once clouded his eyes had given way to a clarity, a resolve that was unshakable. Laura, I've moved on. I've met someone who values the things that you took for granted: honesty, commitment. His voice was steady, leaving no room for the hope I clung to. The finality in his tone was a blow, the reality setting in with crushing force. The fallout was swift. Mark, sensing he was never my first choice, ended things, leaving me adrift in a sea of my own making. Alone, with the debris of my choices scattered around me, driven by a mixture of denial and desperation, I went to Alex's place, a foolish part of me hoping to see a crack in his newfound resolve. Instead, I found him laughing, his apartment filled with warmth and light, a stark contrast to the cold, empty space I'd become accustomed to. Laura, we're past the point of fixing anything, he said, his words slicing through the last of my hope. What you did, I can't just overlook it. I need to move on, for my own sake. Walking away from his door, the weight of my actions settled heavily on my shoulders. The realization hit me hard. I had lost Alex, the love of my life, because I couldn't see what was in front of me until it was too late. My affair with Mark had left me with nothing but a profound sense of regret. Meanwhile, Alex thrived, embracing a new chapter with someone who shared his values. I heard about their plans to travel abroad, a fresh start, a new adventure. It was what we had once dreamed of doing together, and now, he was living that dream with someone else. I tried to pick up the pieces, to find some semblance of normalcy in the aftermath. But moving on proved to be a Herculean task. My career suffered as my performance dwindled, a reflection of the turmoil within. Nights were the hardest, the silence a constant reminder of the void left by Alex's absence. In the end, I was left to navigate the consequences of my choices, a journey marked by loneliness and a lingering guilt that refused to fade. The path to redemption was unclear. Each step forward a reminder of what I had lost and the love I had squandered. The moment I saw Alex with someone else, laughing in that way he used to with me, it was like a punch to the gut. The reality of what I'd done, what I'd lost, crashed over me with merciless clarity. Standing there, outside that cafe window, I was the embodiment of regret, watching the life I could have had unfold without me. In a desperate bid for some semblance of normalcy, I reached out to friends I'd neglected during my affair with Mark. The cold reception was a sobering reminder of the ripple effect of my actions. Conversations were strained, filled with unspoken judgments and pity I didn't want. It was clear I'd lost more than just my husband. I'd lost the trust and respect of those I cared about. Work became my refuge until it wasn't. My performance had slipped, a fact my boss made painfully clear during a terse meeting where I was given a warning. Get it together, Laura, or we'll have to make some tough decisions, he'd said, his disappointment another layer to my shame. The isolation was suffocating. The affair, once a thrilling escape, had left me barren of the connections that mattered. Each day bled into the next, a monotonous reminder of the cost of my selfishness. Therapy was my last-ditch effort to claw my way out of the hole I dug for myself, Sitting in that sterile office, recounting my story, I began to understand the depth of my self-deception. It was painful, confronting the parts of myself I'd rather ignore, but necessary. The path to redemption was fraught with the hard truths I'd avoided for too long. In a quest for meaning, I started volunteering at a local charity. The work was humbling, a balm for my fractured ego. Each small task, each thank you, was a step toward rebuilding the sense of self I'd lost. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Reflecting on the ruins of my life, I understood the harsh lesson of consequences. My affair hadn't just destroyed my marriage, it had dismantled the very foundation of who I thought I was. The journey ahead was uncertain, filled with the daunting task of forging a new identity from the ashes of my past. But for the first time, amidst the wreckage, I felt a flicker of hope. The moment of reckoning hit me like a wave, relentless and unforgiving. Sitting in my therapist's office, the walls adorned with diplomas and soothing artwork, I finally faced the truth I'd been running from. My quest for validation outside my marriage had not only destroyed my relationship with Alex, but had also eroded my self-worth. It was a painful admission, the realization that I had sought completeness in someone else because I hadn't believed I was enough on my own. Driven by a newfound determination to rediscover who I was before the chaos, I threw myself into new hobbies and interests. Photography, painting, even rock climbing, activities that challenged me, that required focus and dedication. They were distractions, sure, but they were also steps toward filling the void within with something other than regret. One afternoon, while sorting through boxes in the attic, I stumbled upon a collection of photos and letters from my time with Alex. Each image, each word, was a snapshot of the happiness we once shared, a stark contrast to the pain and betrayal that followed. Holding those memories in my hands, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of my actions, the loss of a love that was once pure and promising. The journey of self-discovery was lonely, fraught with moments of intense clarity and overwhelming sorrow. I began to acknowledge the magnitude of what I'd lost, mourning not just the end of my marriage, but the life we could have built together. It was a necessary grief, a step toward accepting the reality of my choices. In my quest for redemption, I reached out to friends and family I'd pushed away, my heart heavy with the knowledge of the hurt I'd caused. Apologies were made, some accepted, others met with skepticism. Rebuilding trust was a slow process, one conversation at a time. I was learning the hard way that some relationships were forever altered by my actions, a sobering reminder of the consequences I had to live with. The hardest lesson was recognizing that no amount of regret or self-improvement could undo the past. I was forced to confront the irreversible nature of my decisions, to find a way to move forward with the knowledge of the pain I'd inflicted. In my search for peace, I turned to nature. Long walks in the forest, the sound of the river, the quiet of the mountains, these became my sanctuary. Away from the noise, the judgment, the reminders of my failed marriage and affair, I found moments of solitude that offered a semblance of peace. Through therapy, reflection, and the pursuit of new passions, I began to understand the importance of self-worth, the danger of seeking validation from others, and the hard truth that the path to healing was mine to walk alone. It was a journey of self-discovery, of learning to live with the consequences of my actions, and slowly, painstakingly, rebuilding the fragments of my life into something new. The day I finally forgave myself was the day my world started to shift. I was sitting on the edge of my bed, the morning light casting a warm glow across the room, when the weight of my past actions hit me full force. It was a crushing, liberating realization. Forgiving myself didn't mean excusing my mistakes, it meant acknowledging them, learning from them, and allowing myself to move forward. Reconnecting with my family was a pivotal step in my healing process. I'd expected resistance, cold shoulders, even anger, but instead, I found open arms and hearts willing to understand. My parents, my sister, they didn't condone what I'd done, but they supported me, helping me stitch back the pieces of my fractured spirit. Their acceptance was a powerful reminder of unconditional love, a beacon as I navigated my way through the fog of remorse. Professionally, I was clawing my way back from the brink. I poured my heart and soul into my work, determined to regain the trust and respect of my colleagues and boss. It was a slow process, filled with small victories and setbacks, but each day brought me closer to the professional redemption I sought. My dedication didn't go unnoticed, and slowly, the professional relationships I jeopardized began to mend. In the midst of rebuilding, I embraced my single status, not as a sentence, but as an opportunity. It was a chance to rediscover who I was outside of any relationship. I focused on personal growth, on cultivating independence and resilience. The loneliness that once threatened to consume me evolved into a comfortable solitude, a space where I could grow and reflect without distraction. Rediscovering old passions breathed new life into my existence. I dusted off my paintbrushes, uncapped my pens, and allowed creativity to flow through me once again. Painting, writing. These were not just hobbies but lifelines, reconnecting me with parts of myself I'd neglected or forgotten. Each stroke, each word, was a step toward reclaiming the identity I'd lost in the chaos of my affair and its aftermath. Accepting my new reality was perhaps the hardest part. My life had changed irrevocably, shaped by choices I couldn't take back. But within that acceptance was peace, a surrender to the flow of life that brought a surprising comfort. I learned to live in the moment, to cherish the present without the constant yearning for what could have been. Looking to the future, I was cautiously hopeful. The journey had taught me the importance of living with integrity, of the value of honesty in all relationships. I understood, perhaps for the first time, that the foundation of a meaningful life was authenticity and kindness. Reflecting on the path I'd traveled, the pain I'd caused, and the lessons learned, I vowed to live differently. My mistakes were a part of me, but they didn't define me. With a heart humbled by regret but hopeful for redemption, I faced the future, ready to embrace whatever came with grace and gratitude. Life, I realized, was not about avoiding mistakes but about how we rise after falling, how we heal,